remember that was just the trickiest part, just to kind of be waiting there anxiously, like, oh God, I just want to her know, I just want to, hear it. And when they called, it was literally like time stood still. But when you're like so nervous about something or so anxious, and like literally it feels like time is standing still, like you are literally feel like you hear your heart beating like super crazy, you can't really breathe, like you're just so nervous. And you just like kind of try to grasp from like the first few words the nurse on the other end is saying, like, is it good news or bad news? Hi everyone, welcome back to Very Beginning. Super excited to be back here for you again on a gloomy Thursday. I hope you are doing well, that the week is going good for you, and that it's finally becoming a bit warmer and more springy wherever you are. Today is going to be the next phase, let's call it, of the entire IVF series that I'm doing. So I kind of try to think like how to make it the most structured and also not overwhelming, because there is just so much content. So last episode was all about kind of that IVF stim process and all the shots and how that all works, kind of everything leading up to the egg retrieval. And then today is going to be all about that big day of the actual egg retrieval, that procedure, how it's like, how it was for me. Because again, all of this is my personal experience that I just want to share with you to hopefully help some women, some couples out there that are going through something similar, to feel a bit less worried, a bit less scared, a bit less alone. And then I'm also going to talk today about kind of what happens after the actual procedure in those next few days, because they are super nerve-wracking and exciting. And then also I'm going to talk a little bit about what PGT-A testing is, why we did it, and kind of all of the ins and outs. So to jump right in, as I mentioned last episode, if you haven't listened to it, go check it out first, because it kind of makes sense to start there. But that was all about kind of leading up to the egg retrieval. So all the stimulation that you're doing, all the shots, the various drugs, and the monitoring. And whenever your doctor sees on the ultrasounds that your follicles are about at the size where they want them to be, so that they're ready to be retrieved, they will schedule your egg retrieval procedure or egg retrieval surgery. I mean, surgery sounds very dramatic, so I don't really want to call it surgery, because it's not like no one is cutting you open or anything. It's really just a small 20-minute procedure. But some clinics will refer to it as egg retrieval surgery. So just want to put it out there that you've heard it before, so it doesn't sound so scary if they do. But yeah, no one is cutting anything open. It's just a more or less small needle, but I'll get into that in a minute. So basically, whenever your doctor sees on the ultrasound that your follicles are at the size where they want it to be, they will schedule your procedure, and they will give you super detailed instructions about when to do that trigger shot. And I talked about it in the last episode. There, it's super important that you do the trigger shot at exactly that right time. Sometimes it's 2 trigger shots, and it's just so important that it's literally like to the minute, the time. I remember my doctor even asked me to like text him to confirm that I did it, because again, it's like kind of the success then of the procedure, of how ripe hopefully the eggs are that they're retrieving, really depends on the fact that you did that trigger shot to that right time. I remember on the day of the procedure, so you will usually be asked, usually I think in most clinics it's in the morning that they schedule these procedures, so you will be asked to come in about half an hour to an hour early. I think I mentioned in previous episodes that I'm a bit stereotypical German in the way that punctuality is really important to me, and I get like super, super anxious if I'm running late. And of course, if it's something like a procedure like this, and where, you're already nervous, I just remember being so like, not even nervous about the procedure, but just really nervous, about like, what if we're late and what happens. And we live a bit outside of London, so it is a bit of a journey for us to get there, because our clinic was in central London, and we wanted to drive because after the procedure I kind of didn't fancy being in the subway or in the train. So we were like, okay, fine, we'll just leave the house super early. But then once we got into the car, which we did like, I don't know, an hour and a half before the procedure, traffic was just so bad because it just gets like crazy here in London with like morning traffic and everything. So we were like, okay, that's cutting it a bit too close. So we then decided to drive to like a nearby train station, park there, and then just take the train from there to the clinic, because that would that ensured that we would be on time, or kind of on time with that buffer that I wanted to arrive in. But I remember it was a bit funny because I was wearing my like super cozy clothes. I mean, not PJs, but like super, super cozy clothes, because you are kind of, I mean, you don't have to, but they advise you to wear something like really comfortable, like fluffy socks. Also, you're not allowed to wear like any makeup or any like hair products. You have to remove all your jewelry, all your nail polish. So like come all natural, basically in your pajamas. So, and since we were intending to drive, that's kind of how it looked like. And then, yeah, we ended up taking the train, which was kind of funny, because it was like with all the fancy business people heading to work, and I was like literally in my PJs. But yeah, maybe it made me a bit more relaxed because we were just laughing about that situation. But yeah, so then you basically get to the clinic and you get to meet your doctor who's doing the procedure. Again, in our case, we were super lucky that our fertility doctor was the one who also did the egg retrieval. He was literally doing everything from every scan to, the actual egg retrieval. So that was super nice to see a familiar face and just kind of made us feel really calm and reassured. One thing I was a little bit nervous about was kind of and I don't want to say anesthesia because it's not really anesthesia that they give you. It's like a light form of sedation. But I was just a bit nervous about that because I never had that before in my life. The only time I had any type of kind of anesthetic was, I think, when I had my wisdom teeth removed as a teenager. And I remember then, and that was only like a partial one where you they numb your cheeks or your mouth. And I remember with that one, I still ended up like kind of feeling everything they were doing. And I think that just made me so nervous about like, oh gosh, what if, I don't know, my body just metabolizes it quickly and I'm able to still feel everything they're doing. And so I was just a bit in my head about that. But rest assured, I did not feel a thing. So essentially, yeah, you come to the clinic, you have to wait a little bit. They take you to a room where you then will also be waking up and you kind of have to get dressed in a gown and everything. And as I said, like jewelry, all of that stuff you need to take off if you haven't done so at home. And yeah, I think the procedure itself lasts for about 20 minutes. So you walk yourself through the procedure room, you lie down. In the room weren't even like that many people. It was my doctor who was performing it, the anesthesiologist, and then a nurse. And I just remember everyone being like so nice and so gentle, and because I kind of said it's like the first time I'm having any form of anesthesia, so I was a bit worried about that. And they were just so kind and so nice. And I remember like the nurse like stroking my head, and it was just a really nice environment. And yeah, then they give you whatever drug that is. And my doctor was saying before that like that's an amazing drug. It just makes you you will have the best nap of your life. Which I did. Like you literally, I don't know, you breathe that in and a few seconds later you are deep asleep. I did not feel a thing. And then you wake up. So before I say what happens when you wake up, just to kind of like what happens when you're asleep, is that essentially they take a super, super long but thin needle that I think is attached to like an ultrasound wand. So it's basically almost like an internal ultrasound that you can imagine. So basically they go in and with this super long thin needle, they go into each ovary. And there's only basically like one spot where they go in each. So it's not like they're going to be poking around like crazy. The thing is that they can like be really, really detailed about, because they're seeing everything with the ultrasound. So they can be super precise about where they're going and where they want to suction out all the follicles because they can see that on the ultrasound. So they do one on, let's say, the left ovary. They suck out all the follicles, which hopefully contain the eggs. Because again, on the ultrasound, you can't actually see if they contain eggs or not, but later they can tell you. And then they go into the other one and do the same. And it's actually really like exciting in real time because as your doctor suctions it out, there is an embryologist. So then right away, because he kind of sits on the other end and receives whatever comes out, and they already start looking under the microscope and seeing like, okay, was there an egg in this follicle or not? So from what I heard on the doctor side, I mean, I was asleep, but I think for the doctor, it's also kind of nice and exciting because literally in real time while they're doing it, they're getting updates from their team like, we have 1, we have 2, we have 3. And of course, anyone who has been through this knows that every single, egg you receive, every single thing is just such a celebration. You're so happy about it. So I heard that from the doctor side, it's kind of nice to get these real-time updates. But yeah, I did not see or hear any of that. Thank God. I had the best sleep ever. There was actually, I think the funniest thing about this whole procedure, that when I woke up, I was so drowsy and literally, I mean, it's not like I didn't remember anything. I remember going to the room and, all these people and falling asleep. But then you don't remember the procedure because you're fully asleep. What I also completely don't remember is how I even got from the procedure room to the waking up room. But I'm pretty sure I must have walked. So no idea that. I completely don't remember. And I remember also waking up. I was so obsessed with the fact that they didn't allow me to wear my own slippers. I have no idea why, but I just brought my own slippers and they said no, you can't really wear them. So I kept or in my head, I was just telling that to my husband, because he was there when I was waking up, oh, yeah, I couldn't wear my slippers. I couldn't wear slippers. And he was like, you literally told me that 5 times. And that was just really funny because in my head, I just woke up and was just telling that to him for the first time. But yeah, so I was super out of it. I felt super floaty and, kind of probably you feel on drugs. Yeah, so it was just kind of funny to be in that drowsy stage. I think it was probably funniest for my husband seeing me like this and talking to me being all loopy. And yeah, maybe I should also mention while you have your procedure, if you're doing just the egg freezing part, then you just have the procedure and that's fine. If you are doing IVF, then your husband or your partner or whoever you're doing it with has to come with you to the clinic because at the same time while you have the procedure, they have to give a sperm sample because they always like to have a fresh sperm sample for then later try to fertilize the eggs. I think from what I've heard and researched, it does also work with frozen sperm. So if let's say you have you're doing IVF and you have a sperm donor or for whatever reason you have frozen sperm, I think that also works. But if the person who, will be giving the sperm is able to be there, is able to be present, they will always be asked to give that fresh sample on the day while you are having your procedure. So when I was when I had it a bit more together and was a bit more awake, my doctor came to tell us the results of how many eggs they were able to retrieve. And I remember when he came in, he already looked a bit sad, and that was a bit of a bummer because I could literally, we had such a good, or we still have such a good relationship with him, so I could just tell because he was just so, I think, excited, and he's just such a passionate person. I think he's really in this job for the right reasons. And because, as I mentioned, I did have quite a few follicles, so something like I mentioned in the last episode, OHSS was always a concern for me. So we always kind of at least were happy that we knew, okay, we'll get a bunch of eggs. And he went in with a certain expectation. And as I mentioned in previous episodes, I'm not going to say the specific numbers of eggs retrieved and so on, because I just think it's so personal. And I've seen other videos like this, and you just ultimately start comparing yourself and thinking oh, this woman got that many eggs or this couple got that many embryos. I don't think it really serves anyone to do that. So I'm not going to say specific numbers, but I just want to still talk about kind of my experience, our expectations, and kind of more percentage variations. So yeah, we expected to get a bit more. So we got around 50% less of what we expected to get. And already the number we were expecting to get was kind of a conservative estimate. So it wasn't even all the follicles he was seeing on the ultrasound. It was just kind of the number he felt really good about, really confident about getting. And then we got 50% less of that. So it was a bit of a bummer. I tried to not be too sad about it because, it was still a decent number of eggs. So I wanted to be happy about it. But of course, it's really hard to, pretend that it doesn't upset you. And that's just one of those things, like that constant up and down, like in IVF. And that's why I want to even do a separate episode on all things mental health in IVF, because that's just such a huge part of it, because that physical side might seem like the big one because you're doing, all these things to your body, but wow, the mental thing, like, let me tell you, that's just probably the trickiest thing ever to deal with, like these constant ups and downs, these expectations, having them, sometimes be completely shattered. And sometimes, on the other hand, you're just like so happy because you didn't expect a good outcome. So that's just really tough. But yeah, in any regard, we were still really happy and grateful about the number we did get. So for the rest of the day, you didn't even have to stay, or at least in our case, we didn't have to stay long in the clinic. I think I stayed for another half an hour. Then they just make sure that you're all good, not, that your blood pressure is good, that you're not too dizzy or anything. You have to eat like a few cookies and stuff. And yeah, then we had at home. They advise you to kind of take the day off if you can, stay cozy, stay on the sofa, watch some movies, eat some warm soup, drink some tea, just really rest and give your body some time to recover. Because even though the procedure is small, you still have to think about that your body just underwent this massive, hormonal marathon of growing like all these extra eggs and follicles that usually in a month it's not able to do. And then also they had like this huge, I don't say it's huge, but it's a really long, albeit thin but long needle that was injected into both your ovaries. So it's still, quite invasive in that way. So really important, I think here also my advice, like take that day or even the next day if you can, rest as much as possible. They do also tell you to like take painkillers if you want to. I think for me, the pain actually wasn't so bad. They give you painkillers, I think, right away after the procedure. But they will tell you like you can take, I think, ibuprofen or paracetamol, whatever it was. They will always tell you that. Also, if you need more, I think I maybe took one pill, but honestly, the pain was completely not bad, maybe a bit like period cramps. I also did not have any bleeding afterwards. Some people do, so that's just something to be expected. And then I think they do also advise you to kind of, even though like the next day technically like you don't have to stay, horizontal, you can walk around, but they do advise you to not like, go and exercise and to kind of take it easy for, I think, at least a couple more days, if not a week, just to fully let yourself recover. But yeah, I think literally by the next day, I felt totally fine and had no pain, nothing, slept well. So the procedure itself, really, I had built up in my head so much more than it actually was. I was like really worried about the anesthetic part and about, how the pain and everything. And at the end of the day, it was honestly probably like the least tough thing physically, other than kind of that emotional disappointment factor that I talked about. So in the next days to follow, they are super exciting and they are super nerve-wracking. So at this stage, even before, but at this stage, it comes into play whether you made the decision to do a fresh or a frozen embryo transfer. I think I mentioned in previous episodes that in many countries that I know of here in Europe and in the UK, most couples, especially if, the woman is quite young and if there's also risk of OHSS, again, there's like overstimulation, doctors do tend to suggest to go the frozen embryo route just to let your body rest and recover and these hormone levels to come down. But you do also have the option to do a fresh transfer, which essentially means that when you go home after your egg retrieval, you would have to already start taking other shots to kind of build up that uterine lining to prepare your body to receive an embryo. Because if you're doing a fresh transfer, most likely you will probably have your transfer in about 5 days. So that one is like way quicker and I guess way more for your body because you have to, continue right away. We did not do that. In our case, the whole reason of doing IVF, right, was my previous weird situation with my AMH dropping. So for us, it was really clear that we want to do the frozen one to give my body also time to recover. So the frozen route for us just made the most sense. Also for us, really the reason why we wanted to do a frozen transfer is that we wanted to do the PGT-A testing. That's something that I mentioned in the beginning. If you've never heard about PGT-A testing, it is, let me look at my notes, it's pre-implantation genetic testing for aneuploidy. And essentially what it is a test where they take a few cells from what will later become the placenta. So they take it like from the embryo, which then later forms. And then they're able to test it for some chromosomal abnormalities. So I know that in some countries it's really restricted. I know that in Germany, for instance, you can't just decide that you want to do it. I think you have to show that in your family there are some genetic conditions that you're kind of worried about, and that's why you want to do it. On the other hand, I think in the US it's like super available, and there they not only tell you kind of the chromosomal results in case there are any abnormalities, but they even tell you like the gender, because technically at that stage, if they do this chromosomal testing, they already see like, is it an XX, so a girl, or an XY, a boy. So in the US, I know that you can even find that out and technically already even pick the embryo by gender that you want to have transferred. Here in the UK, it's stricter than that. You cannot know the gender at all. It's also not something we wanted to know, but it is really, really strict in a way that not even your doctor will know it. So basically like the lab who does the PGT-A testing, they are the only ones that know it, but they do not write it down like anywhere. Like literally I think it's like super, super strictly regulated. They will send the results to your doctor of like the chromosomal abnormalities, or the chromosomal, kind of like picture to see if there are any abnormalities, but the gender will not be disclosed to anyone. So yeah, that was something that we wanted to do really for the reason that we had that previous miscarriage, and for it's a really highly likelihood that that miscarriage was due to a chromosomal abnormality. So I think when you go through that and you are maybe in a country where, you are able to do that PGT-A testing, it was just something we really wanted to do, just to have that additional, reassurance, to reduce the risks, of course, because it does reduce the risk of a miscarriage happening, because the embryo at least, right, like it's healthy. And then, of course, also, again, because no one knew, or still no one really knows what was happening with my body with that AMH drop. Kind of using an embryo where we know that it is chromosomically, genetically normal, would just kind of, help us to understand, like, okay, is there maybe an underlying condition with my body in case it's still not able to take it, or in case it's still not able to kind of implant. So that's kind of why we decided to do it. That PGT-A testing usually takes about 2 weeks. So just kind of to give you a time frame. But in those 2 weeks, there's still a lot of exciting updates that you're getting, a lot of exciting stuff happening. So let's say you decided to go the frozen route, or even the fresh route. I think that's quite the same. Just the difference with the fresh route is that you will start taking shots right away when you come home. So in all cases, and I think that's even the same for the egg freezing, you will get a call from the clinic the next day, because with egg freezing, they will tell you how many of the eggs were mature and then how many can be frozen. So kind of the egg freezing part ends on that stage. With IVF, for both frozen and fresh, they will tell you then on this, like what they call day one, so like 1 day following the egg retrieval, they will tell you how many eggs fertilized. And that is super, super exciting, because that's kind of your starting point, right? I mean, technically your starting point is how many eggs you got. And then this is kind of like the next milestone to know, okay, after they put together sperm and egg, how many actually fertilized. Here it also comes into effect whether you decided to do IVF or ICSI. So I explained in my last episode, so suggest you go back if you haven't watched that there are kind of advantages and disadvantages to both procedures. They're slightly different. In our case, we did like a 50-50 split. So 24 hours later, we get the call from the clinic. And of course, like you can imagine, I was so nervous. I mean, we were both really, really nervous, really, really anxious to receive that call, literally like hanging by your phone. And it's always like when you want your phone to ring, it never does, because they tell you like, yeah, we'll call you around this and this time. But they do also ask you like, please don't call us, because, of course they have like gazillion couples who are feeling the same. And they just, get to everyone when they have the results, when they can. But yeah, I remember that was just the trickiest part, just to kind of be waiting there anxiously, like, oh God, I just want to I just want to, hear it. And yeah, when they called, it was literally like time stood still. Like, I don't know if you ever experienced it, but when you're like so nervous about something or so anxious, and like literally it feels like time is standing still, like you are literally feel like you hear your heart beating like super crazy. You can't really breathe, like you're just so nervous. And you just like kind of try to grasp from like the first few words the nurse on the other end is saying, like, is it good news or bad news? So again, not going to tell you the exact numbers, but in our case, we were, after having like this first a bit like sad news about getting like 50% less eggs, then we were hoping to we did get the incredible news that all of these eggs had fertilized. And that I'm still like so in awe that happened, because and again, that just shows you like statistics are nice, but I think in my very first IVF episode, I talked about it, that like statistics are not everything. And every single person, every single, body, woman, egg, sperm combination is just so unique. And, while they tell you like usually you get like from all the eggs they get around, I don't know, 60% fertilized, that just completely didn't apply to us. So we got 50% less eggs than we were hoping to get, or that we were anticipating to get, but then 100% fertilized. And that is just exactly this roller coaster, this crazy, crazy roller coaster that IVF is, that I was talking about, that you just get these incredibly low lows and high highs. So yeah, we were just ecstatic and so thrilled to receive that news. But of course, like, it doesn't end here. It doesn't mean like, okay, that means we got that on that many embryos. Absolutely not. That's just really the next stage. But I think what I learned on this entire journey, because it is a process, it is a longer journey, it is a marathon, it's not a sprint, is to also just really celebrate those small little achievements and small little milestones. And I did actually view it as almost like, climbing Mount Everest, or a really tall mountain. Not that I ever did that, but kind of in my head of seeing it like as reaching the next base camp, and just being like so happy and so grateful about that. So yeah, we were just super, super happy to get these incredible news, incredible results. And yeah, so then on day 2, you don't get a call from the clinic. And then your next call is usually on day 3. So then what happens is that basically under a microscope, they continue watching the embryos divide, like the cells are dividing. It's really the same thing that happens in your body if egg and sperm were to meet after ovulation, that then, kind of what is starting to form is going from like 2 cells to 4 cells to 8 cells. So the cells keep dividing. And what they are basically watching for, or what they are hoping that these fertilized cells will achieve, is to getting to blastocyst stage. And that's really when they start calling it an embryo. So usually they give it around most reach it by around day 3 to 5. They give it a max of 7 days to reach it. I'm not quite sure like if it's best if they already reach it by day 3, if it's worse if they reach it by day 7. I know that day 5 seems to be kind of really that sweet spot of when most reach it. But that's kind of the time frame that they give it, kind of give the cells naturally to reach. Because at this stage, there is nothing that the embryologist can do. So before, when it comes to trying to fertilize, right, you do have these 2 different ways of like either IVF or ICSI, where you let them naturally find each other, with IVF, or ICSI, where you literally like put 1 sperm and 1 egg. But once they're fertilized, it's up to nature again, right? It's up to these cells to divide, up to these, embryos to start growing, or to try to get to embryo stage. So yeah, by day 3, you get the next call to see how many, are already looking quite good, or are already looking quite close. I think on day 3, the update was quite quick, because they were just saying like, yeah, most of them look like they're almost there. So we were again just like super happy to receive that news. And then by day 5, I think they told us that half of them had reached the blastocyst stage, which we were again so happy and so excited about. And then you get another call. So we got another call day 6 that a couple more reached blastocyst stage. And then I remember we had like 1 left that hadn't yet. And then by day 7, that last one had also reached it. So Again, so grateful, so still in disbelief that, we were able to have this high success rate of embryos that, we were able to obtain from all the eggs that fertilized. And yeah, again, just such a roller coaster experience, all of it. Every time, we got a call to kind of also have a status update, you just get again like so nervous. And I just remember like every time squeezing my husband's hand and just, trying to breathe, because despite, knowing, okay, all of them fertilized, or on day 5, knowing, half of them are already really close to, or maybe already reached blastocyst stage, there's like really never any guarantees with anything. So you're just so aware that at any stage something can go wrong, the cells might stop dividing. So it's just so nerve-wracking to kind of not know, like, okay, are we good? Can you freeze them? You're just like always in this equilibrium of fear and anxiety. So yeah, whenever the embryos then reach this stage where the embryologist says that, they are now kind of officially at blastocyst stage and are ready to be frozen, if or essentially like when they reach the blastocyst stage, that's basically when then it comes in to decide like, okay, what did the patient decide to do? So if, let's say, you said you want a fresh transfer, then this is then when they would take one of them and schedule your transfer for maybe the next day and transfer it freshly into you. If you said you want them, frozen transfer down the line, then that's when they would freeze them all. And if you said, yes, I want a frozen transfer and I want PGT-A testing, again, that's like that blastocyst stage, is when they would take a teeny tiny sample. And here it's also super important to note that, because that's something I was worried about, and kind of when we were deciding if we want to do the PGT-A testing or not. So I was thinking, like, are they taking like the cell of the embryo? Is it not going to impact the, baby's development eventually? But what is so incredible that, on this technically day 5 in this life of the embryo, they can already tell what will become the embryo and what will become the placenta, which I find science just so incredible. So they actually then take a teeny tiny sample from the spot that will become the placenta. So they're not touching it's like baby, even though it's not the baby at this stage, but they're not touching, kind of the actual embryo cells in any way or form. It's really just what will become the placenta. So yeah, they are able to take like this teeny tiny bit and then test it for the chromosomal abnormalities. And then once they take it, they can freeze the rest. So at that stage, you're basically done. You know how many embryos are in the freezer. In our case, since we did the PGT-A testing, we had then another, what was it at that point, like week of anxious waiting to go to know, okay, which ones are chromosomically normal. We did also get the news later on, which were also again really good. It wasn't all of them, but the vast majority, which we're just so grateful for. And they basically then qualify it into, or categorize it into different groups. So there is euploid embryos, which are kind of it's always weird to say normal, but chromosomically normal. So where, all chromosomes pairs are there, look good, there are no like any chromosomal abnormalities. Then there is aneuploid, and that's where they can detect something. So maybe there is a chromosome missing, maybe there's an additional chromosome. More often than not, these are really like drastic things where they know like, okay, this embryo, if you were to transfer it, it wouldn't take, or it would just lead to like a early miscarriage. So these embryos will not be used. And then in between, there's like this category called mosaic. That's essentially where they can't say with like 100% certainty if it's chromosomically normal or not. So we did have also one like this, and usually that's like something like an embryo that you can try to transfer if you want to, but of course you would always start with the euploid, so with the chromosomically normal ones. One thing that they also do, so when you get kind of the results of the genetic testing, in case you did it, or the chromosomical testing, I should say, they also give you like a ranking of the embryos, and that does not have to do anything with the chromosomes. They do that for every embryo, really. They also do it in the fresh transfers, and that's a grading which basically is super important for the embryologist, because based on that, they're able to decide which embryo will be transferred first. So basically, I think they look at how, the cells, like how symmetrical they are, how, wide they kind of divide it. They just kind of look at this embryo, comparing it again to kind of the perfectly looking embryo statistically. And again, with everything, I would just advise, don't get too obsessed about these grades, because it does feel almost like in school when they tell you like, yeah, this embryo is an AB, this one is a BA, because it's always like two different ones, because they give a grade for the actual embryo and one for the placenta, because as I mentioned, they can already see it. And I remember like that was also a bit confusing, nerve-wracking, because ours weren't like all graded perfectly. So of course it makes you think like, okay, does that mean that, your chances whenever you decide to do the embryo transfer will be less? But with this, I also just, again, want to, give you the advice, don't get too much in your head about it. I know of people who did IVF and they like really distinctly said, I do not want to see the grading. I do not want to know the grading, because at the end of the day, the grading is really just for the embryologist to give a recommendation or to kind of decide which embryo is being transferred first, because otherwise they just wouldn't know which one to take. And of course, they want to increase your chances of, having the biggest success rate and the least amount of tries, and like not to waste any embryos, if that makes sense. So the grading just helps them, kind of determine which one to start with. But yeah, try not to get too much in your head about it, because at the end of the day, even if you look at statistics, like even a C, embryo can turn on into a beautifully healthy baby, because that grading has nothing to do about the health of the baby. That is more like the chromosomical testing, where you can see like, are there any chromosomical abnormalities? But it has nothing to do with, if it's not like a 5AA, it means that, something will be wrong with the baby, like 100% not. So just want to, kind of debunk that myth in case, you read anything about it, because I also did a lot of digging on it, a lot of reading on it, because I was worried about it. But honestly, in retrospect, thinking now, like if I were to do it again, I would have almost asked, like, don't tell me the grading, because I think I just was too much in my head and worried about it at the end of the day. But yeah, that's essentially it. And then hopefully if you get to the stage and either, you had your fresh transfer and hopefully it worked and maybe you're already pregnant, or, you have now your beautiful embryos lying in the freezer waiting for whenever you're ready to start transferring them. But yeah, the next episode then in this IVF cycle breakdown will be all about the embryo transfer and how that works. So definitely tune in next week if you want to hear all about kind of what goes into preparation, how that works, how timing is determined. There will again be some shots that you will have to do when it comes to that stage, but yeah, more on that next week. But I hope I was able to break these complex topics down today. If you have any questions about any of it, do write me a note. Would appreciate, of course, any comments, likes, if you leave me a review, no matter where you're listening or watching this. But yeah, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you next time.